Donald Trump, I was here with you last night as this news broke live on this program. We went and heard him out in Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa. The news had just happened. Colorado court actually just coming out and saying, you know what? We're not going to let him be on our ballot. I mean, think about that. Think about how absolutely positively insane it is. I mean, granted, every state gets to do what it wants to do. But if you're living under a system like that, in which states can say, I don't like that guy. I don't like that girl. I don't like what they stand for. I'm just going to say, nope, not happening. They're not allowed to run in my state. I'm going to call them an insurrectionist. I think they want to overthrow the government. And then you take it all the way to the Supreme Court of Colorado and suddenly 4-3. By the way, all people appointed by Democrats, all of those justices were Democrat appointed, and they decide, we're going to take them off the ballot. What kind of system is that? Like, shouldn't the people of Colorado have some say? Mind you, how much you want to bet he winds up winning in Colorado? Anyway, here is Donald Trump's response to this, and he is pointing out what I believe is very obvious right now, that our government has gone totally wild, and that Joe Biden's Democrat Party that has taken over the so-called deep state, they are the threat to the system. That's what, in fact, has materialized. And that's why they're so terrified, because they know if he gets back in there, guess what? They're going to get called out. They're going to get called out in a massive way. By the way, he's got the documents to prove it. That's the whole thing lately, right? All those documents he took off with, they have intimate details about how the deep state decided to go after his campaign in the first place. So if he exposes that, guess what? It is game over. Donald Trump speaking out in a really, really powerful way here, saying exactly what I think most of us already know. The threat to the system is, in fact, Joe Biden himself.
It's no wonder crooked Joe Biden and the far-left lunatics are desperate to stop us by any means necessary. They are willing to violate the U.S. Constitution at levels never seen before in order to win this election. Joe Biden is a threat to democracy. It's a threat. They're weaponizing law enforcement for high-level election interference because we're beating them so badly in the polls.
That's what it sounds like. I mean, you've seen all the polls. Is it any coincidence that the New York Times comes out with its poll that the New York Times is like, oh my gosh, we can't believe we have this poll. They did it in conjunction with CNN. And what they found was that, in fact, Donald Trump is up over Joe Biden nationally by 2 points. They also found that Donald Trump was up significantly, in some cases by 10 points, in some of those swing states that they think, that they could have had. Well, no, they don't have them. This is not a lock by any means for Joe Biden. And that's in part just because they got a lousy candidate who's done a lousy job. I'm sorry, but this is a guy who's done a terrible, terrible job. Jake Sullivan, forgive me, not Jake Sullivan, the PR guy over at the Pentagon. He was quoted, John Kirby was quoted on Air Force One today saying that the President Biden would never do anything to jeopardize the national security of Americans. And I think we're all sitting there going, really? Because it kind of feels like he's done almost everything possible to jeopardize the security, the economic well-being of everyday Americans. It keeps happening over and over and over again. You have only to look at what's going on the border to figure that one out. Anyway, Joe Biden was asked by reporters what his response was to the Colorado court's decision to use this thing that was written in after the Civil War that's never been used before. Keep in mind, this is historic. Like, nobody's ever done this. This is how much they hate him. So they're going to use Clause 3 in the 14th Amendment, saying he was an insurrectionist and he can't possibly hold office because of it. And Joe Biden's all in. Of course. Listen to him here.
Well, I think certainly it's self-evident. You saw it all. Now, whether the 14th Amendment applies, I'll let the court make that decision. But he certainly supported an insurrection. And no question about it. None. Zero. And he seems to be doubling down on about everything. Anyway, I've got to go do this.
Hey, are we expecting a hostage deal anytime soon?
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, where?
That was the other part. Where? Where are we getting the hostage deal?
There's no expectation at this point, but we are pushing.
Can you address the prisoner exchange with Venezuela, sir?
Yeah, can I do that after this event? Okay. All right.
Can I get through one thing at a time? He was asked about Venezuela, and there was an exchange there.
It ain't done yet. Got a long way to go.
The first reporter was asking, of course, about
And your reaction to 20,000
what was going on in the Middle East. Look, the reality is he is in so far over his head, and he has to hope. He has to hope that Colorado comes through for him, because there's no other possible way that he actually gets elected again. I mean, again, I just go back to the polls. I go back to the sentiment of the people right now. I go back to the economy. I go back to the border. I go back to everything that's happening internationally. And look, I told you it was going to be bad, did I not? I mean, I'm just a policy geek, a policy wonk. I mean, I'm probably the only reporter that's sat there and read every single solitary tax policy back in 2016 from every single possible candidate. Like, I was buried in it. And I'm sorry, Ted Cruz, I didn't like yours. I saw a VAT tax in there. All right, so this is me. I love policy and I get really into it. And I will tell you, he had and still has the best policies of any president since Ronald Reagan. Really. I mean, the best economic policy. I happen to know the economic team quite well. My friends, Larry Kudlow, who I used to host a show with for some 5 years over on CNBC. Steve Moore, great friend, economist, wonderful, wonderful guy. Occasionally he comes into this chat, by the way. We'll see if he shows up. We got to get him back on this show. And my dear friend, Art Laffer, who, by the way, is the guy, right, who invented the Laffer curve, that he showed President Reagan on a little napkin, and President Reagan held it up and said, see, you know what, when you tax this much, guess what? You get it's diminishing returns. People don't produce as much, so you don't get as much tax revenue. It's not that hard. But you see, they make it very hard, and a lot of them don't understand any of it, and they're more just entrenched in the politics of everything, who you know, and how much money you're going to make when you're out of office, or dare I say, when you're in office. Right? I mean, that's certainly how it seems on the Joe Biden front. If these allegations turn out to be true, you know what I'm talking about. Hunter Biden, Burisma, China, Romania, $24 million allegedly being distributed to members of the Biden family. And as a result, more than 70 suspicious activity reports going out to Treasury from 6 major U.S. banks, including Bank of America. I mean, I'm just saying. All right. Anyway, so it's sort of a do or die kind of situation right now. They are trying everything they can. I mean, how many lawsuits have we looked at now? You got Fannie Willis down in Georgia. You get Letitia up in New York. You got Jack Smith in D.C. I mean, heck, they haven't even tried the guy they're not even trying him actually on the insurrection thing. They're trying to use this other clause. So let's just get our legal stuff straight, because this was all breaking in real time yesterday, and I want to make sure that what we were reporting was in fact accurate. I was making the point that, you know, there's that case that doesn't go before the Supreme Court, Jack Smith's case, until March. And by the way, it's being heard in March as well, March 4th in DC. But what's significant about this one, it's entirely different, is even in that case, Jack Smith isn't even charging him with insurrection. This is just Colorado out on its own little onesie there saying, okay, well, we're going to try this. We're going to try this because Larry Tribe, let me see if I can find this soundbite for you. Larry Tribe, he's the Harvard guy. He told us to, right? Larry Tribe thought this would be a wise idea. Good old Larry Tribe. You know, I'll take Dershowitz. Thank you very much. Dershowitz is making the point that this is just insane. He and I talked yesterday about what was going on at the Supreme Court level in terms of all of the people, I'm not even going to say insurrectionists, the people that were there on January 6th, and whether or not the government, Jack Smith, could actually use this rather obscure little part of the law in order to actually put them behind bars and to go after Donald Trump. And his view was not really, but there might be something in there for everyone. Well, in actuality, now he's come out and said, as far as this particular case goes with Colorado, this is just insane. Like, there's no way this is happening. But his other colleague at Harvard University most recently had this to say. You see, they were really, really pushing for this 14th Amendment thing all along. They're really overly psyched, and other states are about to jump on the bandwagon. I'll get to that. But first, hear Larry Tribe. Hear what he had to say about how important it was that somehow Colorado could come up with this little number.
How do you view these particular efforts in Colorado and Minnesota to disqualify Trump?
Eamon, thanks for having me back. I think these lawsuits are very carefully and thoughtfully designed. They amass a great deal of evidence that what happened not just on January 6th, but in the lead up to it, with fake electoral slates and all the rest, was an insurrection, as the Constitution uses that term, and that Donald Trump was at the center of that insurrection against the Constitution of the United States and gave it aid or comfort. That does not mean that he gets punished. That would depend on whether he is prosecuted for insurrection and indicted, or whether the pending indictments stick. This is not a punishment. And when you said he violated Section 3, that's not quite the way some people would put it. Some people would say Section 3, like the requirement that you not run a third time after you've been president twice, or like the requirement that you be old enough and a natural-born citizen, is just an eligibility requirement. And when Secretary of State Benson of Michigan said she thinks the courts should decide it, that's really the theory of these lawsuits. They proceed by suing the Secretary of State because under the laws of Colorado and Minnesota, it is that secretary's responsibility not to let someone on the ballot if they're ineligible to hold the office.
So they're going to say he's ineligible because you hear that the theory as it goes. He's ineligible because he's an insurrectionist. They've decided that. And you can't be an insurrectionist because of this law that was put in Article 14, Section 3 after the Civil War. So Colorado did it. You heard Larry Tribe talking about Michigan wants to do it. You can expect that Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, they all want to do it. Heck, California's getting in on the act. This is the latest, guys. Let me show you this letter that just came out there from, I believe this is the Secretary, it's the Honorable, they're writing to the California Secretary of State. They're looking for some assistance there. And they're saying that, in fact, California needs to do the right thing and take them off of the ballot because, well, the Constitution requires that you must be 40 years old and not be an insurrectionist. Does this feel like it was like a bit of a setup? I mean, I throw that out there. Like, was this a setup at all when you think back to January 6th and the refusal by Nancy Pelosi to call in the Capitol Hill police, the refusal to allow any real news crews inside, the refusal to allow all the footage to come forward under all the guise of security, right? Donald Trump even said he tried to go over there at one point and the Secret Service wouldn't allow him. They said it wasn't safe. It makes you think,